Hi, I'm Liz, and welcome to Believe in Yourself. Now that April's over, clearly I'm just churning them out because I now have nothing but time. I read 8 books since my last vlog. I intended to only come in here and talk about 5 today, but they were too good, so I have to do 6. I apologize. I was just too excited about all the books I read this month, and even the ones I'm leaving out were also really excellent, but these 6 I specifically wanted to talk about. They were all 4 and 5-star books, which is super exciting. I just feel like I've been doling out the 5 stars this year, which makes me worry about my rating system, but also I think it's just because I really curated my list this year to things that I was super excited for and that I knew from a lot of feedback that were gonna be really good. And then I've had some surprises, so I'm really excited to dig into it. The first book I'm gonna talk about is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira. I couldn't remember why I picked this up until I read the first page and I was like, oh yeah, mermaids. One of my favorite movies of all time, if you can call it a movie, I guess it's kind of more it's still a movie, it's like a mockumentary, is Mermaids, the Body Discovered, and then Mermaids, New Evidence. It is a Discovery Channel, I think, mockumentary about finding mermaids, and it's extremely convincing. Demi Lovato apparently was oh yeah, this is a real thing. It's really convincing. It's super fun to watch because it's all about the aquatic ape theory and how some of us, when we all were in on the shore, as cave people, some of us went off the shore into the trees to hide from predators, and some of us went deep into the ocean to avoid predators, and that's how those two things mixed. I love reading about stuff like this, watching stuff like this, because it's just all about the terror of the ocean, which is just my favorite thing in the entire world. This book is only that, and it is just incredible. It's basically about a very Disney-esque company. It's fiction, by the way, I should have said that, but this is completely fiction, and it's about how they do things like this all the time, where they send a team to kind of investigate something like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or whatever, cryptozoological things. And it's always kind of fun. And then they sent this one team out to the Mariana Trench, my favorite place in the whole world. Basically ooh, we're gonna find mermaids. And then they did. And it was really bad for them because the mermaids attacked their ship and killed everyone. Years later, they're sending a new team. They're preparing way better. It's not for fun anymore. It's seriously, we need to regain our reputation and figure out what went wrong the first time, and we're sending a new team of people, and it includes people who were deeply affected by the first mission. One of the scientists, her sister died on the first mission, and so she has not only a really great scientific background, but kind of a revenge plot line. There's a million characters because there's just tons of different scientists, because they need biology scientists, they need language scientists to be able to possibly communicate with the mermaids. They need to have basically experts on every kind of aquatic mammal or fish or any of those things, because they need to be able to examine this from every scientific perspective. All the characters were super fun and interesting. There's a great gay love story that I was just My other favorite characters were a pair of twins who are deaf, and so they speak exclusively in ASL. And there was a really great note at the beginning of the book. This made me really admire Mira for including this, or whoever's decision it was to include this. But there was a note at the beginning of the book that basically said ASL is not directly translatable. The grammar of it does not match English grammar. So when when I as an author am translating, it's not accurate. I have to just say that because I have to write it down in some way, which I thought was really great to kind of shed light on that, and make sure that she as an author knows the boundaries of the written word, but knows the truth of it also, did enough work and research to know how ASL really works. So I have a lot of respect for that. And I have a lot of respect for how everything was treated in the book: disability, sexuality, gender. I thought it was all treated really well alongside this amazing, terrifying mermaid horror story. It's extremely violent. These mermaids are not fucking around. And it led to a really interesting story that I just absolutely loved. I was totally taken in by it. It was so scary, so beautiful, so funny, really, really great. The only problem is that I read a book last year called The Swarm. And The Swarm was like 800 pages, a massive undertaking in terms of science and the discussions being had in that book. Very similar premise. It's like about how all of the animals in the ocean start acting really weird, like whales start toppling ships, like crabs start attacking small towns, like all these things start happening, and it's like, what is this? And they basically assemble a team. They, like the government, assembles a team to figure out what's going on. And the ensuing book is one of the most spectacular experiences I've ever had. It was really challenging because the way that the science is talked about, it is not dumbed down. It is very specific and complicated, and the way that all of the science meshes together to solve this mystery was unbelievably beautiful, and the characters in that are just like rich, and their experiences that they have together. By the end of that book, I was sobbing. I was like, I love that book more than I can even express. So that was the complication of also having Into the Drowning Deep, because they're basically doing the same thing. There's nothing wrong with having a shorter, less complicated version of The Swarm, because The Swarm is like so bananas. The whole time I was reading this book, I was just like, The Swarm did it better, longer, more complicated, more interesting. As much as I love this book, I hate that that was sort of just in the back of my mind the whole time, but I couldn't get rid of it because like, I love The Swarm. I'm a Swarm head. Like I wish that book were shorter so that I could recommend it to everybody. So I guess I'm recommending Into the Drowning Deep because it's doing similar things and it's more readable. But I have to just like put it out there that The Swarm is like my favorite book. Like it's probably in my top 5 like ever. Like I just love it so much. I gave Into the Drowning Deep 4 stars. I still thought it was incredible. Like I loved it so much. It is again like very horrific, but in a really realistic way. That's like, we do not know what's in the ocean. It does not want us there. It's very unhappy with us. Like, they're not fun Little Mermaid mermaids. Let's just say that. It's so funny to think about too, because I just feel like this is exactly what I wanted from the Pisces. The next book I'm going to talk about is More Than This by Patrick Ness. This was my first Patrick Ness book. I've obviously heard his name for years. I've never read anything of his. This was my first dive in, and holy shit, I didn't know that he was so good at what he does. More Than This is about a boy named Seth. We have a prologue where we see him drown, and then he wakes up and he's like in a neighborhood and he seems to be alone, and he's just walking around like, well, I guess I'm in hell. He knows he died. He's like, I remember that experience, so I guess I'm in hell, and I guess I'm alone, and I guess I'm just gonna like live here forever. There's a long bit where he's just like dealing with that loneliness, and we're getting flashbacks to his life. And then that's the end of part 1. And the first thing that happens in part 2 is that he meets 2 new people. I won't say a lot more about it because that's when things start to like really ramp up, and I highly recommend this book. I don't want to spoil anything, but like, I will just say that I was on such a roller coaster ride during this book. Every time I thought I knew what was going on, there was something new. I'm not totally sure how I feel about the plot itself and where it goes. It's really interesting. It went completely in a direction that I didn't ever expect, but I'm so fascinated by what Patrick Ness was doing. I'm sorry that I'm like totally spacing about this book, but it's wonderful. It's just truly like such a journey. And Seth is an amazing character to go on this journey with. He's not perfect. He often fucks up. There's a lot of push and pull between him and the other 2 characters in terms of like love and trust that I adored. I can't say enough things. I love it. I don't want to say anything else because I don't want to spoil it, but I highly recommend it. It's wonderful. Read it. I'm going to be reading Patrick Ness now from now on, like forever. So I gave it 5 stars and knocked it out of the park. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Music of What Happens by Bill Konigsberg. This was a recent release, I believe, 2019, and I knew from like the cover that I wanted to read it. It's a beautiful cover. It is about the love story of Max and Jordan. Max is a Latino teenager. He is dealing with some pretty heavy trauma. So this book dives a lot into sexual assault and rape in a way that I thought was so well handled and smart and beautiful. He's not dealing with it well. He's a teenage boy. Like, he doesn't know the language to talk about what happened to him. He knows it, but he's rejecting it. It's really well handled and important to me. And then Jordan is the other character, and he really sucks at the beginning of this book. Like, I had a really hard time. There was a point where I kind of thought I was gonna have to stop. I was just like, he is terrible. And like, at that point, like, I would have died for Max. So I was like, you do not deserve him. But Jordan really grows as a character as the book goes on, like in part with help from Max. Like they really help each other because Jordan is able to give Max the validation that he needs about his feelings, and then Max is kind of able to push Jordan into becoming like the person that he could be if he let himself be that person. It was very realistic. I think the reasons that I hated Jordan and his friends, these two girls, I hated them because I saw myself in them as a teenager, and I look back and I'm like so embarrassed by the way that I acted when I was a teenager. So I think I was like really put off by like, oh, how dare you be so real to me and embarrass me this way. So that was kind of like on me. And then of course, as I got further into the book, I was like, oh yeah, like they're gonna grow, I grew, it's all okay. We all stopped being teenagers eventually. By the time I got to the end of this book, I was like so touched. It was so beautiful. I was really proud of both of their journeys. They came across really interesting to me because sometimes when I read books like these, I'm like, and then they were together forever, right? Like, and then they got married. But this book was really interesting because I felt like I didn't imagine them together forever, but I hoped that when the two of them like parted ways, that they would always look back on this summer of their lives and like appreciate that they were each other's firsts. Like that is really beautiful to me and very rare. Like I think that's actually a really special thing in a book like this. I gave that 4 stars. Again, I was really put off in the beginning, but it really came back around for me, and I really appreciated everything that it was saying. I really loved it. The next book I'm going to talk about is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. This has been on my list since it came out last year. It's a super iconic cover that I've seen everywhere, and I'd heard nothing but good things about this book. It's essays about music. I am a terrible essays reader. I don't do very well with them, but I also said the same thing about short stories, and it is short story collection year for me. And I will say up front that like I read this the wrong way. It shouldn't really be read start to finish like a novel. Sometimes I think that about short story collections too, but I thought that the 2 that I already read this year, like it was okay to read them that way. This one I would absolutely recommend buying it and then like revisiting it constantly, flipping through, reading whatever essays may intrigue you that day, rereading essays. That is, I do own it, I bought it, and so I'm going to go back to it. Reading it from beginning to end in like a couple days like I did not do justice to the book itself. So I'm looking forward to rereading it. And this was also a little bit tough for me because I'm not like really a music person. I never really grew up going to concerts. It's only something I've gotten into really recently, and then still not like a ton. So many of these essays touched me so deeply. There's a Fall Out Boy essay that if you can find it online, I think you can find it on Google Books, that I would just go recommend reading because it is unreal gorgeous. It is like, I cried, it's so beautiful. And I'm not even the biggest Fall Out Boy fan, but I have seen them, and everything that was written about is just so beautiful. There's also essays about Chance the Rapper. There's an essay about rap music during the Obama era that was really interesting. A heartbreaking essay about Rumors, the Fleetwood Mac album that like killed me. And there's also really great sports essays too. There's an essay about Allen Iverson and Michael Jordan that like, I'm from Philly, so I have a lot of Allen Iverson pride. And there's a lot about race that like I definitely felt reading it like it wasn't for me. I would highly recommend this to anyone, even if you don't think that you're like a music person. Like, they're beautiful. They don't like talk down to you at all. And Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, so there's lots of like beautiful language in these essays that is like incomparable. I gave this 5 stars. Again, I really want to revisit it and reread specific essays, especially ones that kind of fell underneath my radar because I was moving through them so quickly. And that's what I would recommend for this. Like with essays, I think the best thing to do is like have it sit on your bedside table for like 6 months. The next book I'm going to talk about is Circe by Madeline Miller, my second Madeline Miller of the year. I read The Song of Achilles earlier this year and I really, really super loved it, but I had some issues with it that like I couldn't overlook. Circe does not have those issues. I fully fell in headfirst and I love this book so much. I think I liked it more than Song of Achilles, but I think that was just personal preference. If you don't know Greek mythology, Circe is a like demi-goddess kind of thing. She's the daughter of a nymph and a titan, Helios, the sun titan. There's a lot of interesting like the differences between like the titans and the gods. Like the titans are very at odds with like the Zeus, Poseidon group, and Circe's kind of like caught up in all of it, but she's very much an outcast. Very similar actually to Patroclus. I think Madeline Miller likes to write about these kind of like shunned characters who maybe like weren't living up to what the standards were at the time for like beauty or power or whatever. If you know the Odyssey, Circe is the one who turns men into pigs, so she kind of gets a bad rap. And Madeline Miller is definitely trying to address that in terms of like, well, what would you do if you were on an island by yourself and men were always crashing on it and trying to hurt you? Like, she definitely develops magic as a defense mechanism and as her own way of being powerful in this world where she has no power. So this just like ticked every box for me. I don't know if I mentioned when I reviewed Song of Achilles, but Odysseus is my boy. I love the Odyssey so much, and I've always been so interested in him as a character. And he's a character in Song of Achilles for sure, but he's kind of perfect. Like, he's just sort of this like great man. And Circe really digs into like how he wasn't a great man. And I feel like Madeline Miller has such a handle on Greek mythology, and it's like the stories themselves, but it can twist them in these like really incredible ways that I'm just so impressed by. Like, God, I wish that were me. I think the reason I ended up giving this 5 stars, 1 star up from Song of Achilles, is that the ending just absolutely blew me away. I'm always so impressed with authors who can take something and it's threaded through the whole book in these tiny little ways where you never really forget about it, and then they bring it back for the end for this huge gut punch. And I think that is the most impressive kind of writing, and the way that Madeline Miller did that in Circe, just like, ooh, it's so good. I'm gushing so much this whole episode. The last book I'm gonna talk about is The Grip of It by Jac Jemc. That is so much fun to say. I have no idea how this fell into my lap. It is a pretty standard little haunted house story. If you've literally ever seen a horror movie about a haunted house, like, it's very Amityville horror, it's very Paranormal Activity kind of thing. It's just your really standard haunted house, like Julie and James, they're a married couple, they're trying to escape some marital problems. They decide to move, they find a house that's a great deal, too good of a deal maybe, and then they move in and stuff starts to happen and then they are trapped there. They don't ever really figure out what's going on. They do try. There's always a classic library scene where our characters go look at the microfiche and to go through the history of the town. And so I think that there is a criticism of this book that you can make, that it is just like utterly derivative. It's not doing anything new about haunted houses. It is just typical standard fare, but this girl loved it. I don't care. Like, you can give me 100 haunted house stories and I love them and I think they're great. James and Julie in particular are great characters, and this book plays into the paranoia and the, like, even when they know that they are like fully being haunted, they're like, are you in on it? Like, are you in on it with this ghost? And the way that like horror often plays off of their own insecurities and their problems in their marriage, like, it just did that so well. It really starts to go off the rails in the end in like a good way, where you're like, what is even happening? Like, what are you people talking about? So I would recommend this to horror fans. I don't know if I would to like non-horror fans, especially if you're scared, because it definitely is scary. Like, there are some moments that I was like, I almost wanted this to be made into a movie, but I'm like, there's a million movies like it, so like, do we really need one? But there are some specific images in this that are going to haunt me forever. I'm not joking. I think it's really hard to write horror books. I've tried to read a lot, and like, very few of them have ever scared me like a horror movie can scare me. It's rare, and it's a mark of good writing if I can read something and be like, holy shit. Like, and I did that in this book several times. I gave that 4 stars. I almost want to reread it again because it just like went by so quickly that I was like, like, it was almost like watching a movie, because I think I read it probably in 2 hours or even less. Again, like, I almost want to say I'm sorry for like gushing so hard. Like, I don't have any like real criticisms of a lot of these books, but like, before I end, I want to do a specific push of a book that came out this week. It is called Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I was lucky enough to read this book last year because I won it in a Goodreads giveaway. This book is just like truly wonderful. It is a love story between this one and this one. Alex, who is the first son in America, son of the president, and Henry, who is Prince Henry, who is Prince of England. So lots of fun stuff to dig into there. They have to pretend to be friends at one point. Love that. Fake relationship stuff. But it's really wonderful. Bisexual representation, I'm always for it. And it has some great representation for finding out that you're queer later in your life, which doesn't get a lot of attention. But I am always a big proponent of that. I didn't really realize I was queer until I was like 21. And I think that there's a lot of media about knowing when you were like 13. And as valid as that is, it's extremely valid. There are a lot of people who didn't realize that they were queer until much later in life. And I want to hear about them too. I want to read their stories too. So that was a really important thing about this book for me. It politically is like a kind of escape. Like it's a lot about politics, and it has a very optimistic view of America that like I wish I could believe in. I love reading this because I was like, it gave me so much hope that maybe there could be a way to like progress as a nation. I'm probably gonna reread it in June for Pride Month because I just love it, and I know I haven't read it since like December, and my partner just read it, and I was like, the whole time I was watching them like, give it back. I want to read it too. It's so special, and I love Casey McQuiston like so much. I follow her on Twitter, and I'm just like obsessed with her. I want this book to do really well so that I can see a movie of it one day. Look at them. They're so cute. Look at this cover. It's so good. I'm obsessed with it. So that's it for me. More May books to come because I'm not done. Thank you so much to everyone who subscribed and liked and commented on any of my videos. Please leave a comment or and a like on this one. Tell me what you want me to read. Tell me what you think about any of the books I talked about. Tell me if you're going to read any of the books I talked about, because I really want to know if any of these appeal to you. I can't wait to talk about more. And until next time, believe in yourself. This shelf right here. Believe in this shelf.